The rain hammered down like bullets on the cracked sidewalk, and 8-year-old Destiny Johnson pressed her small face against the cold window of their third-floor apartment. Lightning split the dark sky, and in that brief moment of white light, she saw him, a tall man in an expensive suit, stumbling down the street below, clutching his chest like his heart was trying to escape his body. "Mama?" Destiny called out, her breath fogging the glass. "There's a man outside and he looks real sick." Simone Johnson looked up from the pile of medical bills scattered across their tiny kitchen table, her dark eyes heavy with exhaustion. She'd been working double shifts at the diner, picking up cleaning jobs on weekends, and still the numbers never seemed to add up right. The last thing she needed was her daughter getting mixed up with some stranger on the street. "Baby, you know better than to worry about people we don't know," Simone said, standing up and stretching her aching back. "Come away from that window and help me fold these clothes." But Destiny couldn't look away. The man had stopped walking now, swaying like a tree in a storm. His face was pale as moonlight, and sweat mixed with rainwater dripped from his forehead. She watched him reach out for the brick wall of their building, his fingers sliding down the wet surface as his knees gave out. "Mama, he's falling," Destiny shouted, already running toward the door. Simone's heart jumped into her throat. She knew that tone in her daughter's voice, the same one she'd used when she found that injured cat last winter, or when she insisted on sharing her lunch with the new kid at school who didn't have any money. Destiny had a heart bigger than their small apartment, and sometimes that scared Simone more than anything else in the world. "Destiny, no," Simone called out, but her daughter was already turning the doorknob. The 8-year-old flew down the stairs, her sneakers squeaking on each step. She could hear her mother's footsteps behind her, but she didn't slow down. Something inside her chest was pulling her forward, like an invisible string connected her to the stranger who needed help. When she burst through the front door of their building, the rain soaked through her thin t-shirt in seconds. The man was on the ground now, curled up on his side, his breathing shallow and fast. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and his expensive-looking jacket was ruined by the dirty water pooling on the sidewalk. "Mister," Destiny called out, dropping to her knees beside him without caring about the cold water seeping through her jeans. "Mister, can you hear me?" The man's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. They were gray like storm clouds, and for a moment he seemed to look right through her. Then his gaze sharpened, and he stared at her small face hovering above him with something like wonder. "Angel," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the thunder. "Are you an angel?" "No sir, I'm just Destiny," she said, reaching out to touch his forehead the way her mama did when she had a fever. "You're burning up real hot. Mama's coming to help." Simone appeared beside them, her own clothes getting soaked as she knelt down. Every instinct told her to grab her daughter and run back inside, to lock the door and pretend they never saw this man. Rich people meant trouble. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. But looking at his face, seeing the way he looked at Destiny like she'd just saved his life, something inside her chest cracked open. "Sir, we need to get you inside," Simone said, her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. "Can you stand up?" The man tried to push himself up, but his arms shook like branches in the wind. His face went even paler, and for a moment Simone thought he might pass out right there on the sidewalk. "I've got you," Destiny said, slipping her small arms under one of his. "Mama, help me." Together they managed to get him to his feet, though he leaned heavily on both of them. Simone could feel the expensive fabric of his suit, could smell the faint scent of cologne that probably cost more than she made in a week. Warning bells rang in her head, but Destiny's determined little face kept her moving forward. They half carried, half dragged him up the stairs to their apartment. By the time they reached the third floor, all three of them were breathing hard. The man's face had gone from pale to gray, and Simone wondered if they should call an ambulance instead of bringing him into their home. "Right here," Destiny said, pushing open their apartment door like she was welcoming an old friend. "You can sit on our couch. It's not fancy, but it's real comfortable." The man looked around their small living room at the second-hand furniture, the carefully mended curtains, the stack of bills still spread across the kitchen table, and something in his expression shifted. Not judgment, but something softer. Something that looked almost like recognition. "Thank you," he said, his voice stronger now as he sank onto their couch. "I don't know what would have happened if..." "If what?" Destiny asked, settling down beside him like they'd known each other forever. "If you hadn't been watching out your window," he finished, looking at her with those gray eyes that seemed to see everything. "If you hadn't cared enough to help a stranger." Simone stood in the doorway, water still dripping from her clothes, watching this scene unfold in her living room. Part of her wanted to ask him to leave as soon as he felt better. Part of her wanted to demand to know who he was and what he'd been doing in their neighborhood in the first place. But the biggest part of her, the part that sounded like her daughter's voice, whispered that maybe just maybe this was the beginning of something that would change everything. The man closed his eyes and leaned back against their couch cushions, his breathing finally starting to slow down. Lightning flashed outside again, illuminating the three of them in their small apartment: a scared mother, a compassionate child, and a stranger who had no idea that falling down on their sidewalk would become the most important moment of all their lives. "What's your name, mister?" Destiny asked, her voice cutting through the silence. "Jonathan," he said without opening his eyes. "Jonathan Pierce." Simone's breath caught in her throat. Even she knew that name, everyone in the city did. Jonathan Pierce, the billionaire CEO whose face appeared on magazine covers and news reports. The man whose company employed half the people in their neighborhood, whose donations kept the local hospital running, whose name was on buildings all across town. And he was sitting on her second-hand couch, saved by her 8-year-old daughter who didn't know the difference between helping a homeless person and helping one of the richest men in America. "Well, Mr. Jonathan," Destiny said, completely unbothered by his identity, "you're safe now. And when you feel better, maybe you can stay for dinner. Mama makes the best mac and cheese in the whole world." Jonathan Pierce opened his eyes and looked at this little girl who had just invited a billionaire to share her family's modest dinner, and for the first time in years he smiled a real smile. Thunder rolled overhead, but inside their small apartment, something warm and bright was beginning to grow. Simone stood frozen in her kitchen doorway, watching the most powerful man in the city rest his head against her thrift store couch pillows. Her hands trembled as she reached for the dish towel hanging by the sink, her mind racing through everything that could go wrong with this situation. Jonathan Pierce. In her apartment. The same Jonathan Pierce whose corporate headquarters dominated the downtown skyline, whose decisions affected thousands of jobs, whose wealth could buy and sell her entire neighborhood without him even noticing the expense. "Mama, can you get Mr. Jonathan some water?" Destiny asked, completely oblivious to her mother's panic. "And maybe some of those crackers with the peanut butter? He looks hungry." "Baby, maybe Mr. Pierce needs to go to the hospital," Simone said carefully, wringing the towel between her hands. "Rich folks like him probably have their own doctors and—" "I'm fine," Jonathan interrupted, opening his eyes to look at her. "Really? I just needed to get out of the rain, and your daughter—" He paused, watching Destiny arrange the throw pillows around him like he was an honored guest. "She saved my life." Simone laughed, but it came out sharp and bitter. "Sir, my daughter's got a good heart, but let's not get carried away. You probably just need some rest and then you can call your driver or whoever comes to pick up people like you." Something flickered across Jonathan's face: hurt, maybe, or disappointment. "People like me?" "You know what I mean," Simone said, crossing her arms over her chest. "People with money. People with power. People who don't usually end up in apartments like this unless something's gone real wrong." Destiny frowned, looking back and forth between them. "Mama, why are you being mean? Mr. Jonathan is sick and we're supposed to help sick people. Remember what you taught me about the Good Samaritan." "Samaritan, baby," Simone corrected automatically, her heart twisting at her daughter's innocent confusion. "And it's not that simple." "Why isn't it?" Destiny asked, settling herself on the floor in front of the couch so she could look up at Jonathan. "He needed help, we helped him. Now he's our friend." Jonathan's smile was soft as he looked down at her. "I'd like to be your friend if that's okay with your mama." "No," Simone said quickly, then caught herself when she saw Destiny's shocked expression. "I mean, Mr. Pierce, I'm sure you're a nice man, but we live in different worlds. You've got important places to be, important people waiting for you. We can't keep you here." "What if I don't want to be anywhere else right now?" Jonathan asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning that Simone didn't want to examine too closely. She'd heard stories about rich men who swooped into poor families' lives, made big promises, and then disappeared when they got bored. She'd lived through her own version of that story, and the scars still ached on rainy nights like this one. "People always want to be somewhere else eventually," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jonathan studied her face, seeing the walls she'd built up, the pain she was trying to hide behind her suspicion. "May I ask what happened to make you feel that way?" "That's none of your business," Simone snapped, then immediately felt bad when Destiny's eyes went wide with surprise. "Mama never talks mean to people," Destiny said to Jonathan, her voice serious. "She must be real scared about something." "I'm not scared," Simone lied, but her daughter had always been too smart for her own good. "Yes you are," Destiny said gently. You get that same look when the bill people call on the phone, or when you think I'm not looking at the sad shows on TV. But Mr. Jonathan isn't gonna hurt us, Mama. Look at his eyes, they're like the nice dog at the park. They're soft. Jonathan almost laughed at being compared to a nice dog, but he could see that Destiny was completely serious. This 8-year-old had read him better in 20 minutes than most adults did after years of business meetings. Your daughter is very wise, he said to Simone. And she's right, I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here because she showed me kindness when I needed it most. And now you want to return the favor? Simone asked, her voice heavy with skepticism. Write us a check, solve all our problems, make yourself feel good about helping the poor people? Simone, Jonathan said carefully, I don't know what happened to you before, but I can see that someone hurt you. Someone made promises they didn't keep, maybe someone who had money and made you feel like you weren't worth their time in the end. Simone's breath caught. He was too close to the truth, too close to the memory of Destiny's father who had swept her off her feet with expensive dinners and big dreams, only to disappear the moment he found out she was pregnant. I don't want your pity, she said. I'm not offering pity, Jonathan replied. I'm offering friendship. The same thing your daughter offered me when she could have just watched me collapse from her window and done nothing. She's 8 years old, Simone protested. She doesn't understand how complicated things get when money's involved. Maybe that's exactly why her understanding is so pure, Jonathan said. She saw someone who needed help and she helped. No calculations, no worrying about what she might get in return or what it might cost her. Just pure human kindness. Destiny had been listening to this conversation with the serious expression she wore when the adults on TV talked about important things she didn't quite understand. Now she stood up and walked over to her mother, taking Simone's hand in both of her small ones. Mama, she said, remember when I was real sick last winter and Mrs. Patterson from downstairs brought us soup every day even though she didn't have to? And remember when Mr. Williams helped us carry groceries when you hurt your back? You didn't worry about complicated things then. You just said thank you and let people be nice. Simone looked down at her daughter's earnest face and felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. That was different, baby. How was it different? Destiny asked. Simone opened her mouth to explain about class differences and power imbalances and all the ways that rich people could hurt poor people without even meaning to. But looking at her daughter's trusting eyes, listening to the rain still pounding against their windows, seeing Jonathan Pierce sitting quietly on their couch like he belonged there, all her explanations suddenly seemed small and mean. I'm scared, she finally admitted, the words coming out in a rush. I'm scared that if we let you help us, we'll start depending on it. And then when you get tired of playing house with the poor people, we'll be worse off than we were before. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle. What if I told you I'm scared too? You? Simone laughed shakily. You're a billionaire. What could you possibly be scared of? I'm scared of going home to an empty house, Jonathan said simply. I'm scared of eating dinner alone again, of having no one to talk to except business associates who only care about what I can do for them. I'm scared that I'll die someday and no one will remember that I was ever anything more than a bank account with a heartbeat. The honesty in his voice cut through Simone's defenses like a knife through paper. She'd expected smooth words, practiced charm, the kind of manipulation she'd experienced before. She hadn't expected raw vulnerability. When your daughter ran out into that storm to help me, Jonathan continued, she gave me something I haven't had in years. She made me feel like I mattered as a person, not as a CEO or a signature on a check. That's not something money can buy. Destiny looked between them, sensing that something important was happening even if she didn't understand all the words. So can he stay for dinner, Mama? Please? Simone looked at her daughter's hopeful face, then at Jonathan's patient expression. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was a mistake, that she was setting them up for heartbreak. But sometimes the heart knew things that the brain couldn't calculate. We're having mac and cheese from a box, she said finally. And hot dogs. Nothing fancy. Jonathan's smile lit up his entire face. That sounds perfect. As Simone headed toward the kitchen to start dinner, she caught sight of herself in the small mirror by the door. Her hair was still damp from the rain, her clothes were wrinkled from her long day at work, and there were dark circles under her eyes from too many sleepless nights worrying about bills. But for the first time in years, she also saw something else in her reflection, a tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, some things in life could turn out better than expected. Behind her, she could hear Destiny telling Jonathan about her favorite TV shows, her voice bright with the joy of having someone new to talk to. And despite all her fears, Simone found herself smiling as she opened the box of mac and cheese. Some risks she thought might be worth taking after all. Jonathan woke up slowly, his mind fuzzy with the kind of deep sleep he hadn't experienced in months. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was. The ceiling above him was unfamiliar, painted white but with small cracks that spoke of an older building, and the couch beneath him was softer than he'd expected when he first sat down. Then it all came flooding back. The storm, the chest pains, the little girl with concerned eyes who had knelt beside him in the rain. He was in Simone and Destiny's apartment, covered with a handmade quilt that smelled faintly of lavender fabric softener. Sunlight streamed through the living room windows, revealing details he'd missed in last night's chaos. The apartment was small but immaculately clean, with everything in its proper place. The furniture was clearly second-hand but cared for. Throw pillows positioned to hide a worn spot on the couch, a coffee table that had been painted to cover scratches, bookshelves made from boards and concrete blocks but arranged with careful attention to both function and beauty. "You're awake." Destiny's voice came from the kitchen, followed by the sound of bare feet padding across linoleum. She appeared in the doorway wearing purple pajamas with cartoon cats on them, her hair pulled back in two neat ponytails. "Mama said I should let you sleep as long as you needed, but I kept checking to make sure you were still breathing." Jonathan sat up slowly, testing how he felt. The chest pains were gone, replaced by a lingering soreness that felt more like overexertion than the sharp panic of the night before. "I feel much better, thank you. How long did I sleep?" "It's Saturday morning," Destiny said, climbing onto the chair across from him. "Mama had to go to her weekend job, but she left breakfast for you in the kitchen. She wrote you a note too, but I can't read all the words yet." Jonathan felt a pang of something disappointment, maybe that Simone had left without saying goodbye. But of course she had responsibilities, jobs to get to, a life that couldn't stop just because a stranger had collapsed outside her building. "What kind of job does your mama have on weekends?" he asked, genuinely curious. "She cleans the big office building downtown," Destiny said matter-of-factly. "And sometimes she works at Mrs. Rodriguez's restaurant when they need extra help. She says she's saving up for something special, but it's a secret." Jonathan nodded, trying to keep his expression neutral while his mind raced. Simone was working multiple jobs, struggling to pay bills, and still she'd taken in a stranger without hesitation. The contrast between her selflessness and his usual world of calculated favors and strategic networking hit him like a physical blow. "Would you like to see the note?" Destiny asked. "Maybe you can help me with the hard words." She led him to the kitchen, where a piece of paper torn from a notebook sat propped against a box of cereal. In Simone's careful handwriting it read, "Mr. Pierce, I hope you slept well. There are eggs and toast in the refrigerator if you're hungry. Destiny knows where everything is. I should be home by 2 p.m. Please don't feel like you have to stay if you have important places to be. Thank you for being kind to my daughter, Simone." The formality of the note stung a little, but Jonathan could read between the lines. She was giving him an easy exit, a way to leave without awkwardness or obligation. Part of him, the part that had business meetings on Saturday mornings and a calendar filled with strategic social events, wanted to take that exit. But a bigger part of him, a part that had been sleeping for years until last night, wanted to stay. She wrote, "Important places," Destiny said, pointing to the words she'd struggled with. "But I told her you probably don't have anywhere more important than here. Right?" The simple question hit him harder than any corporate negotiation ever had. Where did he have to be that was more important than this kitchen, with this little girl who looked at him like he was worth her time and attention? "Right," he said softly. "There's nowhere more important than here." Destiny beamed at him. "Good. Then you can help me with my reading homework, and maybe we can make lunch for Mama so she doesn't have to cook when she gets home tired." As they ate breakfast together, scrambled eggs that Destiny proudly made herself, only slightly burned around the edges, Jonathan found himself really looking at their home. The refrigerator was covered with Destiny's artwork, report cards with mostly A's and B's, and a few past-due bills that Simone had tried to hide behind a grocery list. "Destiny," he said carefully, "does your mama worry about money a lot?" The 8-year-old considered this with the seriousness she seemed to bring to every question. "Sometimes she cries when she thinks I'm asleep. And sometimes we eat peanut butter sandwiches for dinner 3 days in a row. But she always makes sure I have what I need for school, and she never misses my parent meetings even when she's real tired." Jonathan's chest tightened with an emotion he couldn't quite name. He'd donated millions to charity over the years, written checks that had funded entire programs for underprivileged children. But sitting in this kitchen hearing about Simone's quiet sacrifices, those donations suddenly felt abstract and distant. "Your mama loves you very much," he said. "I know," Destiny said simply. "And I love her." That's why I want to help her not worry so much. Maybe you could help too. What do you mean? Destiny finished her eggs and looked at him with those wise eyes that seemed too old for her young face. Mama always says the hardest part about being grown up is having to solve all your problems by yourself. But maybe problems get easier when you have friends to help. Before Jonathan could respond, Destiny had jumped up from the table and disappeared into the living room. She returned with a small wooden box decorated with painted flowers. "This is my wish box," she said, opening it to reveal a collection of folded papers. "Whenever I want something real bad, I write it down and put it in here. Mama says that writing down your wishes helps you figure out which ones are worth working toward." She pulled out a piece of paper and unfolded it, revealing crayon words in her careful first-grade handwriting. "I wish Mama didn't have to work so much. I wish she could smile more. I wish we could go to the zoo." "These are good wishes," Jonathan said, his voice thick with emotion. "Do you have wishes?" Destiny asked. Jonathan thought about his penthouse apartment with its perfect view and perfect silence, his calendar full of obligations but empty of joy, his bank account that could buy anything except the things that actually mattered. "I wish I had a family," he admitted. "I wish I had people who cared about me not because of what I can give them, but just because of who I am." Destiny nodded sagely. "Those are good wishes too. Maybe we can help each other's wishes come true." Before he could ask what she meant, the apartment door opened and Simone walked in, looking exhausted but surprised to see him still there. "Mr. Pierce," she said, setting down her purse and the small grocery bag she'd been carrying. "I didn't expect. I thought you might have left already?" Jonathan finished, standing up from the kitchen table. "I was hoping we could talk, actually, about helping each other." Simone's expression immediately became guarded. "We don't need charity." "Good," Jonathan said. "Because I'm not offering charity. I'm offering something much more valuable." "What's that?" Jonathan looked at Destiny, who was watching this exchange with bright, hopeful eyes, then back at Simone, who was trying so hard to be strong that she'd forgotten how to let anyone help carry the weight. "I'm offering friendship," he said. "Real friendship. The kind where we all help each other, where we all benefit, where no one keeps score because we're family." Simone's breath caught at that last word. "Family?" "Mama," Destiny said, running over to take her mother's hand, "Mr. Jonathan has wishes too. And maybe if we're all friends, we can help make everyone's wishes come true." Simone looked down at her daughter's eager face, then up at Jonathan's sincere expression. Every instinct still told her to be careful, to protect herself and Destiny from disappointment. But standing in her kitchen, seeing how happy her daughter was, feeling the loneliness that had been her constant companion for so long suddenly lifting just a little, maybe it was time to take a leap of faith. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked quietly. Jonathan smiled, and for the first time since he'd collapsed on their sidewalk, it reached all the way to his eyes. "I'm proposing that we take care of each other," he said. "All of us. Together." "Take care of each other how, exactly?" Simone asked, settling into the kitchen chair across from Jonathan while Destiny perched on the counter, swinging her legs and listening with rapt attention. Jonathan had been thinking about this question since he woke up, and the answer felt both simple and revolutionary. "Well, for starters, I'd like to help with some of the practical things that are causing you stress. Your bills, for instance." "No," Simone said immediately, her spine straightening. "Absolutely not." "Mama," Destiny said gently, "remember what you said about listening to the whole idea before saying no?" Simone shot her daughter a look that said they'd be having a conversation about eavesdropping later, but Jonathan pressed on. "Please just hear me out," he said. "I'm not talking about charity or handouts. I'm talking about investment." "Investment in what?" Simone asked skeptically. "In Destiny's future. In your peace of mind. In having the time and energy to build something meaningful instead of just surviving day to day." Jonathan leaned forward, his voice growing more earnest. "Simone, you're working 3 jobs just to keep your head above water. When do you get to spend time with your daughter? When do you get to rest? When do you get to dream about what you really want to do with your life?" "Dreams are for people who can afford them," Simone said quietly. "No," Jonathan replied firmly. "Dreams are for everyone. But some people need a little help clearing away the obstacles so they can see their dreams clearly." Destiny hopped down from the counter and went to her wish box, pulling out another folded paper. "Mama, remember this one?" She handed the paper to Simone, who unfolded it to reveal her own handwriting from months ago. "I wish I could go back to school and become a nurse so I could help people feel better." Simone's cheeks flushed pink. "Baby, you weren't supposed to read that one." But it's a good wish. Destiny protested. And Mr. Jonathan, Mama used to work at the hospital before I was born, but she had to quit when her daddy got sick and she had to take care of me. She knows all about making people feel better. Jonathan looked at Simone with new understanding. You wanted to be a nurse? I was studying to be a nurse, Simone corrected, her voice barely above a whisper. I had 2 semesters left when everything fell apart. But that was a long time ago. I'm 26 now, not some young girl with impossible dreams. 26 is not old, Jonathan said with a slight smile. And dreams aren't impossible if you have the right support system. Mr. Jonathan, Destiny said seriously, could you help Mama go back to school? She's really smart and she always knows exactly what to do when I'm sick or hurt. Destiny, that's not how things work, Simone said, but her voice lacked conviction. Why isn't it? Jonathan asked. What if we made a deal? What if I covered your expenses while you went back to school, and in return, you let me be part of your family? Let me have Sunday dinners here, let me help Destiny with her homework, let me feel like I belong somewhere. Simone stared at him like he'd just spoken in a foreign language. You want to pay for my education in exchange for family dinners? Among other things, yes, Jonathan said. Simone, I make more money in a month than most people see in a lifetime, but I eat every meal alone. I live in a house with 12 rooms and the only voice I hear is my own echo. Last night, eating mac and cheese with you and Destiny, was the first time I felt genuinely happy in years. But what's in it for you really? Simone pressed. Rich people don't just give away money for nothing. Jonathan was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain the emptiness that had been growing inside him for years, the way success had turned out to be a beautiful prison that kept him separate from everything real and meaningful. You know what the worst part about being wealthy is? He finally said. Everyone wants something from you. Every relationship is a transaction. Every friendship comes with expectations. I haven't had a conversation in 5 years where the other person wasn't calculating what they could get from me. He gestured around their small kitchen. But here last night your daughter helped me because she saw I needed help. Not because she knew who I was or what I could do for her. Just pure human kindness. And you let me into your home even though you were scared, even though every instinct told you not to trust me. I was terrified, Simone admitted. I know. But you did it anyway because Destiny needed to help and you couldn't bear to crush that instinct in her. That's the kind of people you are, the kind who put compassion before caution, who choose love over fear even when it's risky. Destiny had been listening to this conversation with growing excitement. So we would all help each other? Like a real family? Like a real family, Jonathan confirmed, looking at Simone. I help with the financial stress so you can focus on school and spending time with Destiny. You help me remember what it feels like to have people who care about me for who I am, not what I have. And we all help Destiny grow up in a home full of love and support. Simone felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. The offer was everything she'd secretly dreamed of but never dared to hope for. But the part of her that had been hurt before, the part that remembered promises broken and dreams shattered, couldn't quite believe it was real. What happens when you get bored? She asked quietly. What happens when the novelty of playing house with the poor people wears off? Jonathan reached across the table and gently took her hand. Simone, I've been bored for 10 years. I've been lonely and empty and going through the motions of a life that looks successful from the outside but feels meaningless on the inside. What you and Destiny gave me last night wasn't novelty, it was hope. It was purpose. It was home. His hand was warm and steady, and Simone found herself looking into those gray eyes that Destiny had compared to a nice dog. There was sincerity there, yes, but also a vulnerability that she recognized because she carried the same wounds. You're lonely too, she said, and it wasn't a question. Desperately, Jonathan admitted. I haven't had anyone ask me how my day was in 3 years. I haven't had anyone cook for me or worry about whether I was eating enough, or care if I came home late. I haven't had anyone need me for anything other than my signature on a contract. Destiny slipped off her chair and came to stand between them, putting one small hand on her mother's arm and one on Jonathan's. Maybe we all need each other, she said with the simple wisdom that kept surprising the adults around her. Simone looked at her daughter's earnest face, then at Jonathan's hopeful expression, and felt something shift inside her chest. The fear was still there, but it was being crowded out by something stronger, the possibility of a different kind of life for all of them. If we did this, she said slowly, it would have to be real. Not some charity project you get tired of. Real commitment, real family. Because Destiny's heart can't handle being broken. Neither can yours, Jonathan said gently. And neither can mine. So we'll all have to take care of each other's hearts, won't we? What would it look like? Day to day, I mean. Jonathan smiled, and Simone could see him relaxing as she began to seriously consider his offer. Well, I'd help you enroll in nursing school. Cover your tuition, books, whatever you need. I'd make sure all your bills are paid so you can focus on studying instead of worrying about money. And what would you want in return? Dinner together a few times a week. Help with Destiny's homework. I was pretty good at math once upon a time. Maybe some advice on how to live like a normal person instead of a robot in expensive suits. Destiny giggled. You don't look like a robot. Sometimes I feel like one, Jonathan said seriously. But last night eating with you two, I felt human again. Simone was quiet for a long moment, and Jonathan could practically see her weighing the risks against the possibilities. Finally she spoke. There would have to be rules, she said. Of course. We split the housework. I won't be your maid just because you're paying the bills. Agreed. And Destiny's discipline is still my job. You can be her friend, but I'm her mother. Absolutely. And if this doesn't work out, if you decide you want to leave, you give us enough notice to get back on our feet. No just disappearing one day. Jonathan's expression grew serious. Simone, I swear to you on everything I hold sacred, that I will never abandon you or Destiny. If something changes, we'll talk about it like family and figure it out together. Destiny had been bouncing slightly on her toes through this entire negotiation. Does this mean Mr. Jonathan is going to live with us? Not live with us exactly, Simone said quickly. He has his own house. But maybe he could come over for dinner sometimes. And maybe help with things when we need it. Like a daddy? Destiny asked, her voice small and hopeful. The question hung in the air like a butterfly that might fly away if anyone moved too quickly. Simone's face went pale and Jonathan felt his heart skip a beat. Like family, Jonathan said carefully. Whatever kind of family we decide to be. Destiny seemed satisfied with this answer. Can we start today? Can Mr. Jonathan stay for lunch and help me practice my reading? Simone looked at Jonathan, seeing the hope in his eyes, the way he was trying not to seem too eager while clearly wanting nothing more than to be wanted. She thought about her empty bank account, her exhaustion from working multiple jobs, the dreams she'd tucked away in boxes marked impossible. But mostly she thought about her daughter's wish for her mama to smile more, and the way Destiny had lit up with joy at having someone new to share her stories with. Okay, she said quietly. We can try. The smile that spread across Jonathan's face was like sunrise after the longest night. Really? Really? But we start slow. Dinner a couple times a week, help with bills that are actually urgent. No grand gestures, no dramatic changes overnight. We get to know each other as real people before we make any big decisions. That sounds perfect, Jonathan said and meant it completely. Destiny clapped her hands together. This is the best day ever. Mr. Jonathan, do you want to see my room? And my books? And maybe you can meet Mr. Whiskers. He's my stuffed cat, but don't tell him he's not real because it hurts his feelings. As Destiny dragged Jonathan toward her bedroom, chattering excitedly about all the things she wanted to show him, Simone stayed in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the table. What had she just agreed to? Was she making the biggest mistake of her life, or finally making a decision that could change everything for the better? Only time would tell. But for the first time in years, she was genuinely excited to find out. 3 weeks later, Simone found herself standing in front of the bathroom mirror at 6 in the morning, trying to remember the last time she'd looked forward to anything as much as she was looking forward to the day ahead. Tonight was Jonathan's third dinner with them, and somehow each visit had become more comfortable, more natural. The first dinner had been awkward, with all of them trying too hard to be polite. The second had been better, with Destiny chattering through most of the meal while the adults smiled and relaxed. But this time felt different. This time it felt like family. Mama, are you almost ready? Destiny called from the kitchen. Mr. Jonathan said he'd be here at 5, and I want to show him my science project before we eat. Coming, baby, Simone called back, giving herself one last look in the mirror. The dark circles under her eyes were finally starting to fade. 2 weeks ago, Jonathan had quietly paid off her most pressing bills, and the relief of not lying awake calculating and recalculating expenses had given her the first full night's sleep she'd had in months. When she tried to thank him, he'd waved off her gratitude. That's what family does, he'd said simply, and something about the way he said it made her believe he really meant it. She found Destiny in the kitchen, carefully arranging her school papers on the table next to the place settings. The 8-year-old had taken it upon herself to make their small apartment company ready whenever Jonathan visited, which mostly involved arranging things that were already perfectly arranged and checking every 5 minutes to make sure nothing was out of place. "What time is it now?" Destiny asked, even though the kitchen clock was right in front of her. 4:30, Simone said, stirring the pot of chili she'd been working on all afternoon. "He'll be here soon. Do you think he'll like my volcano? Mrs. Patterson helped me make it explode yesterday and it worked perfectly." "I think he'll love it," Simone said, and she meant it. Over the past few weeks, she'd watched Jonathan with her daughter, seen the genuine delight he took in Destiny's stories and projects and endless questions. He never talked down to her or seemed impatient with her childish enthusiasm. If anything, he seemed to find her company as refreshing as she found his. The knock on the door came at exactly 5 o'clock, and Destiny raced to answer it. "Mr. Jonathan," she squealed, throwing her arms around his waist in the hug that had become their standard greeting. "Hey there, scientist," he said, hugging her back. "I heard you have something explosive to show me. It's a volcano and it's going to be awesome. But first, Mama made chili and cornbread and she was humming while she cooked, which means it's going to be extra good." Jonathan looked over Destiny's head to where Simone stood in the kitchen doorway, flour still dusting her hands from the cornbread. "You were humming?" "Don't look so surprised," Simone said, but she was smiling. "I hum sometimes." "It's just nice to hear," Jonathan said, and the warmth in his voice made something flutter in Simone's chest. Over dinner, they fell into the easy rhythm that had developed over their previous meals together. Destiny dominated the conversation with stories from school, questions about Jonathan's work that he answered in terms an 8-year-old could understand, and detailed explanations of her various art projects. And then Tommy Martinez said that girls can't be doctors, but I told him that was silly because Dr. Williams, who gave me my shots last month, was a lady and she was really smart, Destiny said around a mouthful of cornbread. "Tommy Martinez sounds like he needs to meet more lady doctors," Jonathan said seriously. "Did you know that some of the best doctors I know are women?" "Really? Do you know a lot of doctors?" "A few. Actually, my company helps fund the medical school at the university. I could introduce you to some of them sometime if you want." Destiny's eyes went wide. "Really? Could I ask them questions about being a doctor?" "Of course. But first you have to finish elementary school, then middle school, then high school, then college, then medical school." "That's a lot of school," Destiny said thoughtfully. "It is," Jonathan agreed. "But you're smart enough to do all of it if that's what you really want." Simone watched this exchange with a mixture of gratitude and something else she couldn't quite name. Jonathan never made promises he couldn't keep, never offered Destiny things that were unrealistic or impossible. But he also never dismissed her dreams or made them seem too big for a little girl from their neighborhood. After dinner, they moved to the living room for the volcano demonstration. Destiny had set up her science project on the coffee table, complete with a carefully written explanation of how the chemical reaction worked. "Okay," she announced importantly, "this is baking soda and this is vinegar, and when I put them together they make carbon dioxide gas that pushes out of the volcano like lava." She poured the vinegar into the baking soda mixture, and the volcano erupted in a satisfying foam of bubbles that spilled over the sides and onto the newspaper she'd spread underneath. "That's incredible," Jonathan said, applauding. "You're like a real scientist." "I am a real scientist," Destiny corrected him. "Mrs. Patterson says anyone who asks questions about how things work is a scientist." "Mrs. Patterson is absolutely right," Jonathan said, and Simone could see that he genuinely meant it. As Destiny cleaned up her experiment, chattering about what she wanted to try next, Jonathan moved to sit beside Simone on the couch. "She's amazing," he said quietly. "You've done such a good job with her." "She's always been special," Simone said, watching her daughter carefully pack away her science supplies. "Even when she was tiny, she had this way of seeing the world that was different from other kids. More open, more curious, more kind." "She gets that from you," Jonathan said. Simone looked at him in surprise. "What do you mean?" "The kindness. The way you took in a stranger in the middle of a storm, even when every instinct told you not to. The way you work 3 jobs to make sure she has everything she needs. The way you put her happiness before your own fears. That's not common, Simone. That's rare." Something in his voice made her really look at him, and she saw an expression on his face that she hadn't seen before, soft and wondering, like he was looking at something precious. "Jonathan," she said carefully, "what are we doing here?" "Really?" He was quiet for a moment, watching Destiny arrange her volcano back in its box with scientific precision. "I think we're becoming a family," he said finally. "I think we're all figuring out how to let people take care of us and how to take care of other people in return." "Is that what you want? A family? With you and Destiny?" Jonathan met her eyes. Yes. More than I've ever wanted anything. The honesty in his voice took her breath away. Over the past 3 weeks, she'd watched him with her daughter, seen how naturally he'd slipped into their evening routines, how comfortable he seemed in their small apartment. But she'd been so focused on protecting herself and Destiny that she hadn't really considered what this might mean for him. You could have anyone, she said. Any woman, any family. Why us? Because you're real, Jonathan said simply. Because when Destiny hugs me, she's not calculating what she can get from me. Because when you smile, it's not because you want something. Because this, he gestured around their living room, where Destiny was now reading a book in the corner, her legs swinging from the chair that was still too big for her. This feels like home in a way that nowhere else ever has. Before Simone could respond, Destiny looked up from her book. Mr. Jonathan, do you want to read with me? It's about a girl who becomes friends with a dragon. I'd love to, Jonathan said, moving to the floor beside her chair. Is the dragon scary? No, he's lonely. Just like the girl. But then they find each other and they're not lonely anymore. Jonathan caught Simone's eye over Destiny's head, and the look that passed between them was full of understanding and possibility and the beginning of something that felt like forever. As she watched them read together, Destiny's small voice mixing with Jonathan's deeper one, Simone felt her last walls finally beginning to crumble. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop protecting her heart and start opening it instead. Maybe it was time to believe in happy endings after all. Higher, Mr. Jonathan. Higher. Destiny's delighted laughter filled the park as Jonathan pushed her swing, his expensive suit jacket long since abandoned on a nearby bench. It was a Saturday afternoon in early spring, and they'd been at the park for 2 hours. What had started as a simple trip to the playground had turned into an adventure involving the jungle gym, a game of tag that left all 3 of them breathless, and now the swings where Destiny was determined to touch the clouds with her toes. Any higher and you'll fly right over the trees, Jonathan called back, but he gave her another gentle push anyway. Simone watched from the bench where she sat grading Destiny's homework, though she'd barely made any progress because she kept getting distracted by the sight of Jonathan playing with her daughter like it was the most natural thing in the world. 6 weeks had passed since that first dinner, and somehow Jonathan had woven himself into their lives so seamlessly that Simone sometimes forgot what their routine had been like before him. He came for dinner 3 times a week now, helped Destiny with her math homework on Sunday afternoons, and had started a tradition of Saturday park visits that Destiny looked forward to all week. Mama, look. Destiny called out as she pumped her legs to make the swing go even higher. I'm flying. I see you, baby, Simone called back, her heart full of the kind of simple joy she'd almost forgotten was possible. When Destiny finally tired of the swings, she ran over to where they were sitting, her cheeks flushed with exercise and happiness. Can we get ice cream now? She asked, bouncing on her toes. Please? Mr. Jonathan promised. I did promise, Jonathan admitted, standing up and brushing grass off his pants. There's a cart by the pond that sells the best strawberry ice cream in the city. How do you know that? Simone asked, curious. Because I asked the kid working there last week what his favorite flavor was, and he gave me a very serious explanation about the superior quality of their strawberry recipe. As they walked toward the ice cream cart, Destiny skipping ahead of them, Simone found herself studying Jonathan's profile. Over the weeks, she'd watched him transform from the formal, guarded man who'd collapsed outside her building into someone more relaxed, more genuine. He laughed more easily now, didn't check his phone constantly during dinner, and had started wearing jeans and casual shirts when he visited instead of his usual business attire. You look different, she said as they joined the line at the ice cream cart. Different how? Younger. Happier. Like you've been sleeping better. Jonathan smiled, and she noticed that even his smiles had changed, less careful, more spontaneous. I have been sleeping better. And I think it's because I have something to look forward to when I wake up. Ice cream for everyone. Destiny announced as they reached the front of the line, having apparently overheard enough of the conversation to know that ice cream made everything better. The teenage boy working the cart grinned at her enthusiasm. Let me guess, strawberry for the little scientist? You remember me? Destiny said delightedly. Of course I remember you. You're the one who explained how volcanoes work while you ate your ice cream last week. As they found a bench by the pond to eat their ice cream, Simone realized that this was what contentment felt like. Not the desperate happiness of rare good moments in an otherwise difficult life, but the steady, warm satisfaction of knowing that this peaceful afternoon with people she cared about was becoming her normal. Mama, Destiny said suddenly, are you and Mr. Jonathan going to get married? Simone nearly choked on her ice cream. Destiny. That's not. We're not. Why would you ask that? Because you look at each other the way people do in movies before they get married, Destiny said matter-of-factly. And because Mr. Jonathan looks at you like you're really pretty, and you look at him like you want to hug him but you're too shy. Jonathan was trying very hard not to laugh, but Simone could see his shoulders shaking with suppressed amusement. Baby, grown-up relationships are complicated, Simone said, feeling her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Why are they complicated? Destiny asked. If you like each other and you make each other happy and you want to be together all the time, isn't that what marriage is? Out of the mouths of babes, Jonathan murmured, just loud enough for Simone to hear. Besides, Destiny continued, warming to her subject, if you got married, then Mr. Jonathan could be my daddy for real, and we could all live in the same house, and I could have a big bedroom like the ones on TV. Destiny, Simone said gently, Mr. Jonathan has his own house, his own life. We can't just assume he wants to change everything just because we've become friends. Jonathan had been quiet through this exchange, but now he set down his ice cream and turned to face both of them. What if I do want to change everything? He said quietly. Simone's breath caught. What? What if I want exactly what Destiny described? What if I want to be a family, all of us, officially and permanently? Mr. Jonathan, Destiny said seriously, are you proposing to my mama? I'm thinking about it, Jonathan said, his eyes never leaving Simone's face. I'm thinking about it a lot, actually. Simone felt like the world had tilted sideways. Jonathan, we've only known each other for 6 weeks. I've known you long enough to know that I've never been happier than I am when I'm with you and Destiny, he said. I've known you long enough to know that I don't want to go back to my old life, eating dinner alone and coming home to empty rooms. I've known you long enough to know that I love you. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge that could either be crossed or burned down. You love me? Simone whispered. I love both of you, Jonathan said. I love the way Destiny explains everything like it's the most important discovery in the world. I love the way you hum when you cook. I love how you both make me feel like I matter, not because of what I can buy or what I can do, but just because of who I am. Destiny had been listening to this conversation with growing excitement. Mama, do you love Mr. Jonathan too? Simone looked at her daughter's hopeful face, then at Jonathan's vulnerable expression, and felt her heart crack open with the truth she'd been trying not to admit to herself. Yes, she said softly. I do love him. Then why can't we be a family? Destiny asked with the simple logic that had become her trademark. Because. Simone started then stopped. Why couldn't they? What was she so afraid of? Because your mama is scared, Jonathan said gently, understanding flooding his voice. And that's okay. We don't have to decide anything today. We have all the time in the world to figure this out. But you want to marry us? Destiny pressed. I want to spend the rest of my life taking care of both of you, Jonathan said. I want to be there for every science project and every bad day and every celebration. I want to be your family in every way that matters. Simone felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. Not sad tears, but the overwhelming kind that came when something too good to believe was actually coming true. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? Jonathan asked gently. Of trusting this much. Of letting myself believe it's real. Of what happens if you change your mind. Jonathan reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and steady against hers. Simone, I spent 42 years of my life thinking I was happy because I had never felt anything like what I feel with you. You and Destiny didn't just save my life that night, you gave me a reason to live it. So we're going to be a real family? Destiny asked, practically vibrating with excitement. If your mama will have me, Jonathan said, still looking at Simone. Simone thought about everything that had brought them to this moment, the storm, the stranger on her sidewalk, her daughter's endless capacity for love, the way Jonathan had become not just a part of their routine but a part of their hearts. Ask me again in a few months, she said finally. When we've had more time to be sure. I'll ask you every day until you say yes, Jonathan promised. Every day? Destiny asked, delighted. Every single day, Jonathan confirmed. Until your mama is ready to make this official. As they walked back toward the car, Destiny chattering excitedly about wedding plans and big bedrooms, Simone realized that for the first time in her adult life, the future felt bright and full of possibilities instead of worries and struggles. Maybe, just maybe, she was finally ready to believe in forever. 2 months had passed since the ice cream conversation, and true to his word, Jonathan had asked Simone to marry him every single day. Sometimes it was playful, a note tucked into Destiny's backpack asking, "Will you marry me today?" Sometimes it was serious quiet moments after Destiny went to bed when he'd take her hands and ask with his whole heart showing in his eyes. Each time, Simone's answer was not yet, but each time her smile got a little brighter and her voice got a little less certain. Tonight was different though. Jonathan had been quieter than usual during dinner, lost in thought in a way that seemed heavy rather than peaceful. When Destiny went to her room to work on a book report, he remained at the kitchen table instead of following his usual routine of helping with dishes. "What's wrong?" Simone asked, settling into the chair beside him. "You've been somewhere else all evening." Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the table surface. "Today is Emily's birthday," he said finally. "Emily?" "My daughter," Jonathan said quietly. "She would have been 12 today." Simone felt her breath catch. In all their conversations over the past 2.5 months, Jonathan had never mentioned having a child. "Jonathan, I had no idea. You never said." "I don't talk about them," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Emily and Rebecca, my wife. I don't talk about them because it still feels like my chest is being ripped open every time I try." Simone reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. "What happened?" Jonathan closed his eyes, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with pain that sounded as fresh as if it had happened yesterday instead of years ago. "Car accident. 3 years ago. They were coming home from Emily's dance recital, and a drunk driver ran a red light." He paused, swallowing hard. "I was supposed to be with them, but I had a conference call that couldn't wait. I always had conference calls that couldn't wait." "Oh, Jonathan," Simone whispered, her heart breaking for him. "Emily was 9. She had Rebecca's laugh and my stubborn streak, and she wanted to be a veterinarian because she couldn't stand the idea of animals being hurt. She would have loved Destiny, would have probably tried to teach her everything she knew about taking care of injured birds and stray cats." Tears were running down his cheeks now, and Simone felt her own eyes filling up. "They sound wonderful." "They were everything," Jonathan said. "And when they died, I thought my life was over too. For the first year, I hoped it would be. I couldn't understand why I was still here when they weren't. But you kept going." "I went through the motions. Work, meetings, charity events, all the things that had seemed so important before suddenly felt meaningless, but I didn't know how to do anything else. I threw myself into business because it was the only thing that didn't require me to feel anything." Simone squeezed his hand, beginning to understand so much about the man who had collapsed outside her building. "Is that why you were walking alone in the storm that night?" Jonathan nodded. "I'd been to the cemetery. I go every year on Emily's birthday and on Rebecca's birthday and on the anniversary of the accident. I sit there and try to talk to them, but mostly I just feel empty." "And after the cemetery?" "I was walking back to my car, but the storm was getting worse and I started having chest pains. Panic attack, the doctor said later. I get them sometimes when the grief hits really hard." He looked up at her with eyes that held years of pain. "I thought I was going to die on that sidewalk. And honestly, part of me wanted to." "But you didn't die," Simone said softly. "No. Because an 8-year-old angel ran out into the storm and refused to let me give up." Jonathan's voice grew stronger. "Simone, when Destiny knelt down beside me in that rain, when she called me Mr. and touched my forehead like I mattered, it was the first time in 3 years that I felt like maybe there was still a reason for me to be alive." Simone felt tears sliding down her own cheeks now. "Is that why you want to be part of our family? Because we remind you of them?" "No," Jonathan said firmly, turning to face her fully. "At first, maybe that was part of it. Emily would be about Destiny's age now, and there are moments when Destiny laughs or asks a question that reminds me of what I lost. But Simone, you and Destiny aren't replacements for Rebecca and Emily. You're something entirely new. Something I never expected to find." "What do you mean?" "I mean that loving Rebecca and Emily taught me how to be a husband and father. Losing them taught me how precious and fragile happiness can be. But loving you and Destiny is teaching me something different. It's teaching me that the heart can break completely and still find a way to love again." Simone wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I've been asking you to marry me every day for 2 months, and you deserve to know what you'd be getting into," Jonathan said. "You deserve to know that I'll always carry them with me, that there will be days when the grief hits me hard and I might be difficult to live with. And you deserve to know that I understand grief," Simone said quietly. It was Jonathan's turn to look surprised. "What do you mean?" Simone took a deep breath, steeling herself to share the story she'd never told anyone in full. Destiny's father wasn't just some guy who ran off when things got complicated. He was my everything. His name was Marcus, and he was charming and successful and everything I thought I wanted. What happened? He died, Simone said simply. Heart attack at 24, 2 weeks after I told him I was pregnant. He never even knew about Destiny. Jonathan stared at her. Simone, I had no idea. I don't talk about him because it's easier to let people think he abandoned us than to explain that he died before he had the chance to be a father. But the truth is he would have been a good daddy. He was excited about the baby, talking about cribs and college funds and teaching our kid to play basketball. You raised Destiny alone because you lost the person you planned to raise her with. For the first few years I was angry, Simone admitted. Angry at Marcus for leaving me, angry at God for taking him, angry at myself for being stupid enough to plan a future with someone when the future is never guaranteed. Is that why you've been so scared to trust this? To trust us? Simone nodded. I've learned that loving someone completely doesn't protect them from being taken away. And I was terrified that if I let myself believe in our family, if I let Destiny get too attached to you, something would happen and we'd lose you too. They sat in silence for a moment, both of them processing the weight of what they'd shared. So we're both broken, Jonathan said finally. We're both human, Simone corrected. We've both loved people we lost and we've both learned how to keep living anyway. And now? Simone looked toward Destiny's room, where she could hear her daughter practicing reading aloud, her voice confident and happy. She thought about the past few months, the way Jonathan had brought light back into their lives, the way Destiny had brought purpose back into his. Now I think maybe broken people who've learned how to love again might be exactly what each other needs, she said. Jonathan reached up and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. Will you marry me, Simone? Not because I'm trying to replace what we lost, but because I want to build something new with you? Something that honors the people we've loved while still leaving room for the family we could become. For the first time in 2 months, Simone didn't say, not yet. Instead she said, ask me again tomorrow? And keep asking until I'm brave enough to say yes. But this time when she said it, they both knew that tomorrow was getting very close. Spring had turned to summer, and Simone found herself humming as she prepared for what had become their traditional Sunday family dinner. It was early July, 3 months since Jonathan had started his daily proposals, and 6 months since the night that had changed all their lives. The transformation in their small apartment was subtle but unmistakable. There were fresh flowers in a vase on the kitchen table, Jonathan's weekly contribution that had started as a gesture and become a beloved tradition. Destiny's artwork now covered not just the refrigerator but a new bulletin board that Jonathan had hung in the hallway, complete with special lighting so her creations looked like they belonged in a gallery. More importantly, there were signs everywhere of a man who had made himself at home. Reading glasses left on the coffee table next to a book he was sharing with Destiny, a coffee mug in the sink that was larger than the ones Simone and Destiny used, an extra set of keys hanging by the door. Mama, Mr. Jonathan's here. Destiny called from the living room, where she'd been watching for his car from the window. Tell him dinner's almost ready, Simone called back, stirring the pot of spaghetti sauce that had become Jonathan's favorite meal. She heard the familiar sounds of his arrival, Destiny's excited chatter, his deeper voice responding with equal enthusiasm, the rustle of whatever surprise he'd brought this week. He always brought something small, a new book for Destiny, flowers for Simone, or sometimes just interesting stones he'd found on his morning walks to share with their resident scientist. Something smells incredible in here, Jonathan said, appearing in the kitchen doorway with Destiny attached to his arm like a small, happy barnacle. It's the same sauce I always make, Simone said, but she was smiling. And it's incredible every time, he replied, coming up behind her to peer over her shoulder at the stove. The casual intimacy of the gesture, the way he stood close enough that she could feel his warmth, the way she naturally leaned back against him for just a moment spoke of how comfortable they'd all become with each other. Mr. Jonathan brought me a book about sharks, Destiny announced, holding up a colorful picture book. Did you know that some sharks have to keep swimming or they'll die? I did not know that, Simone said, turning in Jonathan's arms to face him. Did you know that when you brought this book? I may have learned a few shark facts while browsing the children's section, Jonathan admitted with a grin. Over dinner, they fell into their usual rhythm of shared stories and gentle teasing. Destiny regaled them with tales from her summer day camp, complete with dramatic reenactments of the obstacle course she'd conquered that week. Jonathan shared news from his office, always careful to explain things in ways that made Destiny feel included rather than bored. But Simone noticed something different about him tonight. There was an energy underneath his usual calm demeanor, like he was holding on to some kind of secret that was making him happy. What's got you so smiley tonight? She asked as they cleared the dinner dishes together while Destiny set up her latest art project in the living room. Can't a man just be happy to spend Sunday evening with his favorite people? Jonathan replied, but his smile got even bigger. He can, but you look like you're about to burst with something, Simone said, loading plates into the dishwasher. Spill it. Jonathan glanced toward the living room to make sure Destiny was occupied, then pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. I got some news this week, he said, his voice careful but excited. The nursing program at the university? They reviewed your application. Simone's hands stilled on the dish she was holding. For the past month, Jonathan had been quietly helping her put together her application to return to school. They'd spent evenings working on her personal statement, gathering her old transcripts, and preparing for the interview that had felt both terrifying and thrilling. Jonathan, she said slowly, afraid to hope. You're in, he said, his grin breaking free. Full scholarship, priority scheduling to work around Destiny's school hours, and they're even giving you credit for your previous coursework so you can graduate in 18 months instead of 2 years. The dish slipped from Simone's hands and clattered into the sink. I'm in? I'm really in? You're really in. Classes start in September. Simone felt her knees go weak and Jonathan caught her arms to steady her. I can't believe it. I can't believe this is really happening. Believe it, Jonathan said softly. You're going to be an amazing nurse, Simone. And I'm going to be right here supporting you every step of the way. We're going to be right here, Destiny corrected from the doorway where she'd apparently been listening. What's a nursing program? It means Mama's going back to school to learn how to be a nurse, Jonathan explained. So she can help take care of people who are sick or hurt. Destiny's eyes went wide with excitement. Like when I had the flu last winter and you knew exactly what medicine to give me and how to make me feel better? Exactly like that, Simone said, tears of joy starting to flow. But I'll learn how to help lots of people, not just you. That's the best job ever. Destiny declared, launching herself at Simone for a hug. You're going to be the best nurse in the whole world. As Simone held her daughter and felt Jonathan's hand warm on her back, she realized that this moment, this perfect, impossible moment, was everything she'd never dared to dream of. There's something else, Jonathan said quietly. Something I wanted to ask you both. He stepped back and reached into his other pocket, pulling out a small velvet box that made Simone's breath catch in her throat. I know I've been asking every day for months, he said, his voice suddenly nervous. But tonight feels different. Tonight feels like the beginning of something beautiful for all of us. He dropped to one knee right there in their small kitchen, and Destiny gasped with delight. Simone Johnson, Jonathan said, his gray eyes bright with love and hope. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you and Destiny? Will you let me be your husband and her father, officially and forever? Simone looked down at him, this man who had changed everything about their lives simply by needing help on a stormy night. She thought about how far they'd all come, how much they'd learned about trust and love and healing. She thought about the nursing program that would help her build the future she'd always wanted, about the way Jonathan looked at Destiny like she hung the moon, about the way he looked at her like she was his whole world. Most of all, she thought about the way her heart had finally learned to hope again. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, I'll marry you. Jonathan's face lit up like sunrise as he slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple but beautiful diamond that caught the kitchen light and threw tiny rainbows across the walls. Really? Destiny squealed. Really? We're going to be a real family? We're already a real family, Jonathan said, standing up and pulling both of them into his arms. Now we're just going to make it official. Can I be the flower girl? Destiny asked. Can we have cake? Can I help pick out your dress, Mama? Yes to all of it, Simone laughed, feeling giddy with happiness. Yes to everything. As they stood there in their small kitchen, the three of them wrapped in each other's arms, Simone marveled at how perfectly their broken pieces had fit together to create something whole and beautiful and new. I love you, she whispered to Jonathan. I love you too, he whispered back. Both of you. Forever. Group hug. Destiny announced unnecessarily, since they were already holding each other tight. And in that moment, surrounded by love and laughter and the promise of a future brighter than any of them had dared to imagine, Simone knew that sometimes the best things in life really did come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes an angel really did come in the form of a little girl with a big heart and a stranger who needed saving just as much as they needed to be saved. 2 weeks after Jonathan's proposal, life had taken on a dreamlike quality that Simone sometimes had to pinch herself to believe was real. The ring on her finger caught the light as she stirred her morning coffee, and she found herself stopping whatever she was doing just to look at it and remember that this was actually happening. But reality had a way of intruding on even the most beautiful dreams. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning while Destiny was at day camp and Simone was reviewing her nursing school materials. Jonathan's voice was tight with stress when she answered. "Simone, I need to tell you something and I need you to stay calm." Her stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" "There's been a problem at the company. A major client is threatening to pull out, and if they do, we could lose about 40% of our business. I might have to file for bankruptcy." Simone sat down heavily in her kitchen chair. "Bankruptcy? But you have billions?" "Most of my wealth is tied up in the company," Jonathan explained. "If Pierce Industries goes under, I lose almost everything. The house, the investments, all of it." "Oh my God, Jonathan. What does this mean for us?" There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was quiet. "It means I can't pay for your nursing school. It means I can't help with your bills anymore. It means that instead of bringing financial security to our marriage, I might be bringing debt." Simone felt the familiar flutter of panic that came with money problems, but underneath it was something stronger, a fierce protectiveness for the man she loved. "Do you think that matters to me?" she asked. "I think you have a daughter to consider. I think you deserve better than a man who promised to take care of you and can't even take care of himself." "Jonathan Pierce," Simone said firmly, "are you trying to break up with me because you might lose your money? I'm trying to give you a chance to reconsider before you're legally tied to someone whose life is falling apart." Simone stood up and paced to the window, looking out at the street where Jonathan had collapsed 6 months ago. "Do you remember what I told you that first night? When you offered to help us? You said you didn't need charity. I said we didn't need charity because we had something more important. We had each other. We had love." She took a deep breath. "Jonathan, I fell in love with a man who sat on my secondhand couch and ate mac and cheese like it was the best meal he'd ever had. I didn't fall in love with your bank account. But the practical reality? The practical reality is that I've been poor before and I survived it. We'll survive it together if we have to. I've got 2 hands and a strong back and I can work as many jobs as it takes. And you're brilliant. Even if you lose this company, you can build something else." Jonathan was quiet for so long that Simone wondered if the call had been disconnected. "You really mean that?" he said finally. "I really mean that. For better or worse, right? Isn't that what the vows say?" "We haven't said them yet." "Then let's say them now," Simone said impulsively. "Not the official ceremony, we'll still have that for Destiny. But let's promise each other right now that we're in this together, no matter what happens with money or business or anything else." "Simone. I, Simone Johnson, promise to love you and stand by you whether you're rich or poor, whether your business succeeds or fails, whether we live in a mansion or a 1-bedroom apartment. I promise to be your partner in everything, the good and the bad." She could hear him crying on the other end of the line, and her own eyes filled with tears. "I, Jonathan Pierce," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "promise to love you and Destiny with everything I have, to be the husband and father you both deserve, no matter what our bank account looks like. I promise that my commitment to you isn't dependent on my ability to provide luxury, but on my desire to build a life full of love." "Good," Simone said, wiping her eyes. "Now what can we do to help save your company?" "You're not fighting this alone anymore. You have a family now, remember? Families solve problems together." Jonathan laughed, and it sounded like relief mixed with amazement. "I don't deserve you. Lucky for you, love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing each other every day." That evening, Jonathan came to dinner looking exhausted but determined. He'd spent the day in emergency meetings, trying to figure out how to save Pierce Industries. Destiny, with the intuitive sense that children have for when adults are worried, was extra gentle with him during dinner. "Mr. Jonathan," she said as they finished eating, "you look sad. Are you okay?" Jonathan looked at this little girl who'd become his daughter in every way that mattered, and felt his heart clench with love and protectiveness. "I'm going through some tough stuff at work," he said honestly. "But I'm okay because I have you and your mama." "Is someone being mean to you at work?" Destiny asked with the righteous indignation of an 8-year-old who couldn't understand why anyone would be unkind to her. "Jonathan. Not mean exactly. Just, business is complicated sometimes." Destiny considered this seriously. "When things are complicated at school, Mrs. Patterson says the best thing to do is ask for help from people who care about you. Did you ask for help?" Jonathan met Simone's eyes across the table, remembering their conversation that morning about facing problems together. "You know what? I didn't. But maybe I should." "Good," Destiny said, satisfied. "And if the people at work are still mean after you ask for help, you can come work somewhere else. Mama says there are lots of jobs for smart people." "That's true," Jonathan said, ruffling her hair. Thank you for the advice, sweetheart. Later, after Destiny had gone to bed, Simone and Jonathan sat on the couch planning their wedding. It seemed surreal to be picking flowers and discussing venues while his business empire crumbled, but somehow it also felt exactly right. Are you sure you want to do this now? Jonathan asked as Simone showed him pictures of simple dresses she'd found online. We could wait until everything settles down. We could, Simone agreed. Or we could get married next month like we planned, and face whatever comes next as husband and wife. Even if what comes next is me losing everything? Simone set down the wedding magazine and took his hands in hers. Jonathan, 6 months ago I was working 3 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. I was exhausted and scared and convinced that life would never get better. Then you collapsed on our sidewalk and everything changed. Everything changed for me too. So maybe this business crisis isn't the end of the world. Maybe it's just the next chapter in our story. Maybe it's a chance for you to build something new, something that makes you happy instead of just wealthy. Jonathan pulled her closer on the couch. What if I can't provide for you the way I want to? Then we'll provide for each other. That's what partners do. And what about Destiny's college fund? What about giving her opportunities one might not be able to afford anymore? Simone smiled. Destiny's going to be fine because she has 2 parents who love her and will work their hearts out to give her what she needs. Maybe she won't go to the most expensive private school, but she'll go to college. Maybe we won't live in a mansion, but we'll have a home full of love. You make it sound so simple. Love is simple. It's everything else that's complicated. Jonathan was quiet for a moment, then pulled away to look at her seriously. Simone, will you marry me? Not the man with billions of dollars, but the man who might lose everything except his love for you and Destiny? I thought I already said yes to that question, she said with a smile. But yes, Jonathan Pierce. I'll marry you if you're rich, I'll marry you if you're poor, and I'll marry you if you're somewhere in between. I'm marrying you, not your portfolio. Even if the wedding has to be small? Even if we can't afford the fancy venue or the expensive dress? The only things I need at our wedding are you, me, Destiny, and someone to make it official. Everything else is just decoration. Jonathan kissed her then, soft and grateful and full of wonder that this woman had chosen to love him not despite his imperfections and problems, but including them. I love you, he murmured against her lips. I love you too. Now, what do you think about having the ceremony in the park where we had our first conversation about becoming a family? It's free, it's beautiful, and it's where our story really began. Jonathan's smile was brighter than any diamond. I think that sounds perfect. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with a kind of perfect September sunshine that made everything look like it was lit from within. Simone stood in front of the bathroom mirror in their apartment, adjusting the simple white dress she'd found at a consignment shop for $30. It wasn't the dress she'd dreamed of as a little girl. There was no cathedral train, no intricate beadwork, no designer label. But looking at herself in the mirror, she couldn't imagine wanting anything different. The dress was elegant in its simplicity and, more importantly, it was hers. She'd paid for it herself with money she'd earned, and somehow that made it more beautiful than any gown money could buy. Mama, you look like a princess. Destiny exclaimed from the doorway, her own flower girl dress a sunny yellow that brought out the gold flecks in her eyes swishing around her legs. Thank you, baby, Simone said, turning to fix Destiny's hair ribbon. Are you ready to become Destiny Pierce? I've been ready forever, Destiny said seriously. Mr. Jonathan's going to be the best daddy ever. 3 months had passed since the crisis at Pierce Industries, and the resolution had been both better and worse than anyone had expected. Jonathan had lost the company, but the sale had left him comfortable rather than destitute. More importantly, he discovered that losing the business had lifted a weight he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. I spent 15 years building something I didn't even enjoy, he told Simone one evening as they planned their future. Maybe this is a chance to build something I actually care about. He'd started a small consulting firm, helping other businesses develop ethical practices and employee wellness programs. It wasn't making him wealthy, but it was making him happy in a way that corporate success never had. The wedding was taking place in the same park where they'd shared ice cream and talked about becoming a family. 20 folding chairs borrowed from their church sat in a semicircle around a simple arch that Jonathan and Destiny had decorated with flowers from the farmer's market. It was a small gathering. Mrs. Rodriguez from Simone's weekend job, a few neighbors, some colleagues from Jonathan's new business, and Mrs. Patterson from downstairs who had become Destiny's honorary grandmother. But it was exactly the size wedding they'd wanted, intimate enough that everyone there truly loved them, big enough to feel like a celebration. Jonathan stood at the altar in a simple gray suit, his hands clasped behind his back to hide their trembling. He'd been nervous all morning, not about marrying Simone but about the enormity of what they were promising each other. When the music started, Destiny's voice singing, "Here Comes the Bride," because they couldn't afford a real musician and she'd insisted she could do it better anyway, he looked up to see his family walking toward him. Destiny came first, carefully scattering rose petals while maintaining the serious expression she wore for all important occasions. Behind her, Simone walked alone, having chosen not to have anyone give her away, since she was giving herself freely. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or expensive clothes and everything to do with the joy radiating from her face. This was the woman who had taken in a stranger, who had fought her own fears to build a love worth having, who had chosen to marry him even when his bank account couldn't guarantee their security. When she reached him, he took her hands and felt the rightness of it settle into his bones. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi yourself," he whispered back. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They'd written their own vows, and when it came time to speak them, Jonathan's voice was steady with certainty. "Simone, 6 months ago I thought my life was over. I was going through the motions of existing without any real purpose or joy. Then your daughter saved my life and you both gave me a reason to live it. You taught me that love isn't about what you can provide or receive but about choosing each other every day in good times and bad times, when life is easy and when it's hard." He paused, looking at Destiny, who was listening with rapt attention. "I promise to love you both with everything I have. I promise to be the husband you deserve and the father Destiny deserves. I promise that whether we're rich or poor, healthy or sick, facing triumph or disaster, we'll face it together as a family." Simone's vows were just as heartfelt, her voice strong despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. "Jonathan, you came into our lives like an answer to prayers I didn't even know I was praying. You taught me that it's possible to love again after loss, to trust again after being hurt, to hope again after disappointment. You gave Destiny the father figure she's always needed and gave me the partner I never thought I'd find." She squeezed his hands, feeling the solid warmth of them, the promise they represented. "I promise to stand by you in whatever life brings us. I promise to build dreams with you, to raise our daughter with you, to grow old with you. I promise that no matter what challenges we face, we'll face them together because that's what families do." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise. But the real celebration came when he turned to Destiny. "And now," Jonathan said, pulling the adoption papers from his jacket pocket, "I have something else to ask. Destiny, would you like me to officially adopt you? Would you like to be my daughter for real?" Destiny's squeal of delight could probably be heard 3 blocks away. "Really? Really? I can be Destiny Pierce for real?" "If you want to be," Jonathan said, kneeling down to her level. "If you want me to be your daddy officially, not just in our hearts." Yes. Destiny launched herself into his arms, nearly knocking him over with the force of her hug. "I want to be your daughter forever and ever." As the small crowd applauded and wiped away their own tears, Simone felt a completeness settle over her that she'd never experienced before. This was her family, chosen, fought for, and built on a foundation of love that could weather any storm. The reception was held in their apartment building's community room, with potluck dishes and a cake that Mrs. Rodriguez had insisted on making as her wedding gift. It wasn't fancy, but it was full of laughter and joy and people who genuinely cared about their happiness. "So what's next for the Pierce family?" Mrs. Patterson asked as she helped cut the cake. Jonathan and Simone exchanged a look full of shared secrets and dreams. "Well," Simone said, "I start nursing school next week. Jonathan's business is growing. And we're thinking about looking for a house with a yard where Destiny can have that garden she's been planning. And maybe a dog," Destiny added hopefully. "A big dog who likes to play fetch and doesn't mind getting dirty." "Maybe a dog," Jonathan agreed, laughing at his daughter's persistence. As the evening wound down and their guests began to leave, the 3 of them found themselves alone in the community room, surrounded by the remnants of their celebration. "Mrs. Pierce," Jonathan said formally, taking Simone's hand. "Mr. Pierce," she replied with equal formality. "How does it feel to be married?" Simone considered the question seriously, looking around at the simple decorations, the half-eaten cake, the folding chairs that would need to be returned tomorrow. 6 months ago, if someone had told her she'd be planning a budget wedding to a man she'd known less than a year, she would have thought they were crazy. But standing here now, wearing a $30 dress and a ring that had cost more in love than money, she knew she'd never been happier. "It feels like coming home," she said finally. "Good answer," Jonathan said, pulling her close for another kiss. "Can we go home now?" Destiny asked, tugging on both their hands. I want to hang up my adoption papers in my room so everyone knows I'm really a Pierce. As they walked back to their apartment, soon to be their temporary home, while they looked for something bigger, Simone marveled at the path that had brought them here. A storm, a stranger, a little girl's compassionate heart, and a mother's willingness to risk everything for love. "Hey Destiny," she called out as her daughter skipped ahead of them up the stairs. "Yeah, Mama?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For running out into that storm to help someone who needed it. For teaching me that sometimes the best things come from the scariest moments." Destiny grinned, the gap from her lost tooth making her smile even brighter. "That's what angels do, right? Help people find what they need." "Right," Simone agreed, looking at her husband and daughter with a heart so full it felt like it might burst. "That's exactly what angels do." And as they climbed the stairs to their apartment, their home, their beginning, their forever, Simone knew that sometimes the most beautiful love stories started with the simplest act of kindness from the purest heart. Sometimes all it took was a little girl who believed in helping strangers, and two broken adults who learned how to heal each other. Sometimes, miracles really did come in the smallest packages.